So in this presentation, we're going to be looking at a geometry lesson that I recently taught this past school year, and we're going to analyze it using the Kemp model, which is an instructional design model for lesson planning. So to give a brief overview of the school that I taught this at and the lesson itself, I'll give you some information about the courses that I taught and specifically the group of students that I used this lesson with. So this lesson talks about quadratic equations and quadratic functions. This is an integrated mathematics 2 course, so this is a secondary math course. And specifically in this point with the curriculum, we are in our 3rd module, and modules are broken into different subtopics, and specifically we are looking at applications of quadratics. So we're looking at quadratic functions as equations, representations as tables, and also on graphs on the coordinate plane, which are parabolas. Some learning outcomes that we have, which is part of our Kemp model, is that students will be able to independently use their learning to identify specific parabolas through questioning of key characteristics of the function. Students will be able to describe key characteristics of quadratic functions through accurate questioning. Students will be able to complete the formative assignment with at least 75% accuracy. And lastly, students will be able to identify a specific quadratic function within 5 questions in the Desmos activity. So looking at our learning outcomes, specifically the last 2 are where we incorporate a goal or a learning outcome that's measurable. This is part of the Kemp model where we actually go back and revise or reevaluate our learning outcomes to make sure that the learner knows what's expected of them throughout the lesson, as well as something that we can measure that fits the diverse needs of each learner. Next, we'll look at the instructional level and the learning environment. So a little bit more information about the learners that we have with this lesson and how it fits the description of the model here. So some information on the actual learners in this classroom of where I taught this lesson. Since this is a Math 2 course, it is 10th grade students. Our class size is approximately 30 students. And what's interesting or kind of unique compared to other secondary sections is this is a block section, which means that instead of having students for just 1 class period a day, we have them for 2 consecutive class periods. This allows me as the instructor to spend more time working on background skills, diving deeper into either background topics, prior assessment, or the new material that we're working on. Another thing that I want to note is we are a 1-to-1 school district with technology. Every student has their own school-issued device that they're expected to bring to class every day, and we utilize technology regularly in every content area in our school district. Looking specifically at the different needs of our learners in this lesson, like I said, our class size is approximately 30 learners, give or take with full attendance. So some statistics of these 30 learners in my classroom this past school year. We had different needs of each learner, sometimes with multiple needs, and these were things that I had to consider when lesson planning and when looking at the characteristics of all learners in our classroom, which again is another part of our Kemp model. So out of those 30 learners, 8 students have either an individualized education plan or a 504 plan. 4 students are English language learners that are noted in our elevation system, so they have additional services provided through that elevation platform. They get yearly testing. They also have some additional services that they can use throughout the year on either assessments or during standardized testing dates. 10 of these students are below the recommended reading level of a 10th grade student. They're noted in our system with our state and district-wide assessments. So specifically, we use STAR reading and STAR math assessments, which is by Renaissance Learning. And that is something that students are expected to test 2 to 3 times per year, per school year, in order to track their progress in reading and mathematics. So as I said, a lot of different needs that we have to consider when lesson planning and when designing our lesson using the Kemp model. In step 2 of the Kemp model, it stresses knowing the characteristics of the learners that are in the classroom, because we know that this affects what activities are appropriate, what resources should and should not be used, and how learners learn in the classroom that best fits each and every one of their needs. So some specific connections to the Kemp model and why I felt that this lesson is successful with the Kemp model is that it is very flexible in meeting the different needs in my mathematics classroom. It's flexible to the diverse needs of learners that I have in this classroom. And it also helps me organize and reevaluate the learning outcomes based on these specific characteristics and needs. One thing that I also like about the Kemp model that I felt aligned really well with this lesson is that it includes formative and summative assessments that track those measurable learning outcomes, which is part of the 9th step in that process, as well as the first and second step of our learning outcomes. And our last part of this presentation is the references. So 2 references that I pointed out here that helped with my learning in this module is our instructional video presentation provided by ACE, as well as the Kemp design model from instructionaldesign.org.